I've spent the last few months working on the most comprehensive recreation of a Pokemon game within Minecraft, with custom furniture, interiors, working puzzles, and working mechanics from classic Pokemon games to make the game as immersive as possible. But before we get into all of that, let's start with how I got here. When I first discovered Cobblemon, it quickly became my favorite mod, adding Pokemon to Minecraft while keeping Minecraft's blocky aesthetic. Even though it had no sense of progression or story to it like the original games did, it was still so much fun. This led me to learn more about it and eventually share what I learned by creating this channel. Thanks to all of you, over the past year, the channel started to grow and I even started to get sponsored by Cobblemon servers. But after some issues, I realized I couldn't rely on these servers that I didn't have control over. I also didn't like the feeling of promoting some of these pay-to-win servers. Besides, none of the servers felt like it captured my vision of a perfect Cobblemon server. So I decided to take it upon myself to bring that vision to fruition. Growing up, my favorite Pokemon game was Pokemon Emerald, a game I've played countless times in different ways over the years. So, when deciding to create a map, naturally, I decided to recreate the Hoenn region. With that sorted, I started building. I wasn't much of a builder, but I tried my best, creating most of the buildings in the game. Then, by using the Axiom mod, I saved them as blueprints so that I can quickly place them around the world whenever I needed them. Then I got reference images of all the areas in the game, turned them into Minecraft schematics, and built on those. At first, it honestly felt like I could finish the map in a few weeks, but it ended up taking much longer, leading me to almost give up, but thankfully I was able to push through and create this entire map. When I made the map, I decided I didn't want to use doors in the buildings because they didn't fit how I wanted the buildings to look. So I had to come up with a solution to let players inside buildings. The solution I came up with was inspired by how the interiors of buildings in classic Pokemon games were on separate map files. So I put the interiors of buildings on a separate layer of the map. Then I made players teleport to the interiors when they enter the doorframe of buildings. Then, to complete the effect, I added a fake black whenever entering buildings to mimic how it looks in Pokemon Emerald. With that sorted out, we could now move on to the interiors. I could have easily just used Minecraft blocks to make the interiors, but I wanted the interiors to be as immersive as possible. Here is where I should probably bring up the main limitation of the project. I wanted players to be able to connect to the server without having to install extra mods. They should just need to install Cobblemon. So that meant that I couldn't make players install mods to add the furniture I needed to make the game more immersive. Thankfully, I found the Filament mod, a mod that only needed to be installed on the server, which somehow lets you add blocks, items, and decorations without needing players to install extra mods, by only using resource packs. It still meant that I needed to get these furniture modeled and textured, so after some tutorials, I eventually learned how to create custom 3D models that I can add into the game. At first, I sent these models to be textured by someone on Fiverr, but by studying how they did their textures, I eventually learned how to texture the models myself. I ended up creating around 90 unique pieces of furniture, which I then painstakingly added to all the buildings to make them as accurate as possible. As you've seen so far, this project really takes a lot out of me. So if you like what you see on the map so far, consider being a Patreon. Patrons in the Explorer tier would be able to explore the server's map early while it's still in development. And since I probably won't be able to get sponsors anymore as a competing server host, your support through Patreon would mean a lot and would let me invest more time into this. But if you can't support through Patreon, liking and subscribing would still help a lot. With the interior sorted out, let's move on to the next feature. You might have noticed that I didn't show any of the gyms when showing the interiors. That's because those needed more than just recreating how they look, but also how they worked. So after some more tutorials, I learned how to make custom data packs, which I then used to recreate all the functions of the gym puzzles. Rustboro didn't need much, since it was just a simple maze that led to the gym leader's area. Dewford was also simple, since it was also just a maze, but just needed to be dark, which I achieved with the blindness effect. Marvel was a bit more complicated since I needed to create custom buttons that switched the Tesla coils between two modes. Laverage took a bit more tinkering, but I was able to implement the geysers that let you go up and down the 2 floors. Unfortunately, I couldn't implement Petalburg yet because I needed to add NPCs, which I would be adding later on in the project, since they triggered the doors to open. I also couldn't implement Fortress City because it needed these spinning gates, which I couldn't replicate in Minecraft. Thankfully, Moss Deep was possible, where I was able to add the moving statues, along with teleporters that let you navigate the whole gym. Zotopolis had the most complicated logic to implement. I wasn't able to recreate it perfectly, but I got close. The only difference being that instead of falling when you doubled back, you fell when you took too long on one tile. The solutions to all the gyms were the exact same as in Pokemon Emerald, so if you already know the solutions, you'll be able to solve these easily. With the gyms done, all the important areas were built, but exploring the whole map took way too long on foot, so I needed to add some ways to get around faster. Just like in the classic games, I added running shoes, which let you run faster when you equipped it. I also implemented bikes, which was made possible by an old video by Mr. Crayfish that showed how he added bikes into Minecraft without mods. Unfortunately, it was only for an older version, so I had to rebuild it from scratch for newer versions, while also adding features like the bike spawning when you ride it, despawning when you get off, and letting the bike work in first-person mode. Even with bikes though, you couldn't get everywhere in Pokemon Emerald. There were still some areas you couldn't reach without access to certain HMs, which were Pokemon moves you can use outside of battle. I couldn't find a way to let Pokemon themselves use HMs outside of battle, so instead, I created items that can trigger the effects of HMs. For example, the HM device for Cut lets you cut down small trees in your path, which respawn when you get out of its range. Similarly, the HM device for Rock Smash lets you break rocks, which also respawn when you get out of range. The HM device for Strength lets you push boulders that are in your way around. Then, the HM device for Flash lights up dark caves. The HM device for Fly lets you choose a city to travel to. Then, after a fade to black, you'll find yourself standing in the city of your choice. The most complicated HM device was for Surf, Waterfall, and Dive, which I merged into one device. With the help of a data pack from this video on adding motorbikes into Minecraft, I was able to make the HM device for Surf, which placed a custom surf blob on the water to let you surf. To unlock Dive and Waterfall, you'd need to install modules. If you installed an extra module for Dive, you'll receive a notification whenever you're in a diveable area, where you can right-click to dive down and right-click to resurface. If you have the Waterfall module, you'll be able to climb any waterfall. These HMs make the map feel that much more immersive. That's where the map is so far. I'm currently working on adding more than 1,000 NPCs from Pokemon Emerald, shop UIs, and a perfect one-to-one recreation of the terrain, since I wasn't happy with the current accuracy of the terrain. But once I've added all these features and fixed all the bugs, the server will be publicly available for everyone to play in. Again, if you want to explore the service map early, Patreons in the Explorer tier get early access. But if you just don't want to miss anything, make sure to subscribe to see the next updates. See you next time!